The Canada immigration scam is failing miserably. So we're starting to see the unraveling of the immigration bubble that has formed in Canada over the past 7 to 8 years. The thing is, it's really obvious to see that this is a bubble when you look at how extreme the migration and the immigration levels have gotten, and then you look at the sentiment of the general public towards higher and higher immigration. And you can see more and more in polling data that people are becoming less likely and less welcoming to immigrants. Now, I'm an immigrant myself and I'm actually pro-immigration, but even I have been pushing back against the migration campaign that has been going on because it has ultimately been a scam and the general public has been lied to by the government and been sold a immigration program which is not helping the country and is not helping them and is not filling the country with highly skilled workers, but is filling the country with lower skilled workers that are essentially keeping wages lower for pretty much everybody in the economy. Immigration is pretty good at keeping wages lower when you are bringing in lots of lower skilled immigrants into the country. One of the most popular methods of getting people into the country is through the student visa program. And this has since been rolled back a little bit, but we have seen millions and millions of immigrants come in using this program over the past couple of years. Now, they come in, they take these programs, they often never end up working or doing what they trained up to do in college or university, and they most often than not end up in low-skilled jobs, which is basically suppressing wage growth for these lower-skilled jobs. The reality is, if you didn't have immigrants doing these lower-skilled jobs, the wages for those jobs would have to be increased. And if you look at some of the employers of these low-skilled jobs, they are often multinational, massive mega corporations such as McDonald's, Loblaws Group, Walmart, all your standard typical corporate entities with wages being so low for the majority of immigrants that come to the country. It's somewhat of a laughable argument that people keep coming out and saying that the housing bubble has been generated by immigration. I mean, even the government, both sides of the aisle, both conservatives and liberals, have took the side in saying that immigration and admitting that immigration is actually helping fuel the housing bubble. That may be contributing to the housing bubble, but when you actually break it down, it is somewhat stupid to just blame immigrants entirely for the housing bubble. You see, the housing bubble is a debt bubble at its core. And when you think about the amount of debt and you think about the people who are able to get the debt, it is less and less likely to be those immigrants. And if those immigrants are getting into the debt and buying the houses, then we have a very major problem. And I do believe we have a major problem with that in certain areas. Another big problem with the Canada immigration scam is multiculturalism. You've often been told that Toronto is one of the most multicultural cities in the world. And multiculturalism in itself is an utter failure when it comes to Canada. You have the complete opposite of multiculturalism in Canada. You have essentially a lot of these cultures and different people are segregated into different communities. For example, in Toronto, you have an area that is predominantly Chinese, that is called Markham. You have an area that is predominantly South Asian, which is Brampton. So these people tend to segregate themselves and stick within these certain communities, and they're not actually integrating into Canadian culture. And you see, that is a big problem because Canada already has a certain identity crisis that is going on. We've seen this play out many, many times in different countries throughout history. When a country loses sight of what its cultural identity is, and that is brought into question, it can often lead to dictators and authoritarian governments getting in as people get more and more upset at the constant divisive nature of society. And you do have a lot of division in Canada right now because you've had Canada that has pumped immigration massively over the past 8 years, took in immigrants from all over the world, from cultures that are totally different to that of traditional Canadian values. And they don't want to adopt or integrate into Canadian society or adopt Canadian values because they might go against their religious beliefs or just cultural beliefs. And the problem with doing that is, yes, you can say we're inclusive and it doesn't matter where you come from. And that is all great. That is all well and good. But the problem with that is you lose sight of your cultural identity. And eventually that leads to an identity crisis, which can lead to dictators and authoritarian governments getting in charge. And we're already starting to see governments, both sides of the aisle, that are seemingly getting more and more authoritarian. It is sad to see Canada's demise in this way, because Canada is a country with massive, massive potential. Canada is a country which has the potential to have a booming economy. It has tons of natural resources. It has tons of land and space. But the problem with Canada is you have a massive housing bubble that has sucked so much money away from business investment and has gone into simply housing and land. And there is no short supply of land in Canada. So it's easy to see that this is just a housing bubble, because it's really the land bubble that is causing the housing bubble. I think what we will see over the next 2 to 3 to 4 years is you're going to see more and more people and public opinion that are saying, actually, we want lower immigration. We want immigration to come down. There's going to be more of a push towards bringing immigration down, and the collapse of the bubble in itself, the immigration bubble. And the immigration bubble has been hiding the growth problem in Canada, and the growth problem has been caused by the housing bubble. Like I said, so much capital, so much investment money gets sucked into this housing speculation mania, and there's all these narratives that swirl around it. You go to a different place, you go to a different country, and when you have a housing bubble, there's always a narrative. That main narrative here in Canada is always the immigration one. But when you really think it through, it's just entirely stupid. Of course, immigration contributes to the housing bubble. It contributes to rental demand massively, which will contribute to speculative demand, but it's not directly affecting the housing bubble in itself. At the end of the day, if people can't afford to buy a home, they can't afford to buy a home. It doesn't matter if you're bringing in new immigrants or not. If those new immigrants aren't rich, and most of them aren't, they're poor, they have less money than Canadians, they earn 30% less than Canadians, then they're not going to be affording the house. And if they're crowding together 8 or 9 or 10 of them and buying a house, then the average household size is so much larger than a Canadian household that really their impact on the housing stock is so minimal. And that's the thing. People don't think things through. They just see these narratives, they get very emotional, and the housing bubble is hugely emotional in Canada. And I think right now you have a party that is promising to keep the housing bubble going, which is the Conservatives. You have a party that is desperately trying to keep the housing bubble going, which is the Liberals, and it's pick your worst poison. I mean, at the end of the day, I think the Conservatives will be a better government. I think the Conservatives are just going to bring back more traditional values. But I do think not much will change, and it will just be a lot of talk that you hear, a lot of talk that people like to hear. And that's the big problem. We need massive change in order to turn around the country, and there seems to be no change or sign of change on the horizon. So anyway, we'll continue to monitor what happens with the Canada immigration scam. People are being promised a life, and it is not turning out to be what they were promised, and they are being scammed by the propaganda that is out there. If you've enjoyed this video, I would highly recommend that you check out this video here. I will see you in the next one. Take care.